Hi, guys.
Hi, everybody.
Welcome to another installment of Parlor Tea. Actually, part
Another, another installment of Salem
two.
Parlor.
Yes, very excited. We're on
Yes.
a. I missed it already as soon as he left there. I missed it. It was just wonderful place. Hi, Jay.
Who else we
So
got?
that's what we got. We got Jay who said, "Hey." Hopefully, other people will come on
Well, let's
and
get Sarah on.
Sarah on.
Hi.
Hi. How are you?
Hey. Dandy. How about you?
Good. Our favorite historian.
Yay. Thanks.
But we had
Oh,
fun, and I got a chance to meet a bunch of people at a convention. We'll just leave it at that. But we got a chance, and I hung out with Jay and Sarah, and we met Madam Adam, which he agreed to be a part of our Parlor Tea. So we are very excited here at the Parlor Tea to actually have him come on. We met Adam and Scotty the Medium and the wonderful Katrina again.
You've been to two major paranormal events in the past couple days.
Oh yes, I actually went to a bar over there in Sayreville with I was at the Parlor was asked to be a part of this paranormal investigation last night with the guys at I Heart Horror, which are absolutely amazing. And I got a chance to be a part of something. I met some really great, amazing people. Holly was there, so that was great too. I got a chance to see Holly again and investigate a bar that was in Sayreville that I didn't know anything about, but they did a really great way about it. You don't know, and you just in there. It was still going on at the same time, but there was a lot happening, and a lot of things happened with me between a headache and feeling weird, very like not all there, very off the cuff, normal for
Wait,
me.
they were doing like the investigation while people were there, like separately, or how did
Yep.
that go?
I mean, it was good because it was just he had a little bit of a microphone and a like an amp that he was able to talk. The other people were just really just eating and drinking and talking amongst themselves. I didn't really. I think it got drowned out on that side of it, and then we were just on our side. But otherwise, I thought it was very interesting. Um, you knew when things were going on, but you as soon as it was over, it was over. So, but it was very interesting. It was great to hang out with them, and I met some really amazing people that hopefully will come and visit the parlor. So we're excited about that. But yep, we're excited about our next installment, which, as you know, and people say we can't. There's several things that we can continue with Salem.
oh
But
yeah.
yeah, so we're going to discuss the hauntings in the throughout the city of Salem, uh,
hmm
and it's fun. I'm going to
Yeah.
say this because I always think about manifestation now, and we're going to manifest this. In April of 2025, we are in the midst of working with the Hawthorne to try to put together a ball. It'll be a weekend package that will include the ball and the ball theme. Hopefully, fingers crossed, everyone. It is a Titanic theme. So we're over here, at least Rick is over here putting stuff together um, and getting people excited. And we have a list of things that we can do to really market this and be a very successful experience. Plus, you get a chance to see everything. Go there and experience a slower time during that time, so you get a chance to see a lot more. And I got everybody excited. Rachel's coming with her daughters, so we could all meet Rachel. Yay! Anyway,
Gonna meet Rachel.
okay, take it away, Sarah.
So hey everybody. So last week we went to Salem, and we talked about the more historical aspect of it and the causes that may have led into what we all know Salem witch trials and all these little pieces that added into this horrific, dark chapter in American history. But Salem, as all, we've all been there. Salem is a very old city, and it has a lot of tales and a lot of stories. And obviously, because of this background that it has, it is known as one of the most haunted cities in America. So, this is just a sampling of some of the many stories out of Salem, Massachusetts, of people that have experienced some sort of paranormal activity in various places across the city. But I figured, what better place to start the discussion of haunted places in Salem than the old burying point, Charter Street Cemetery. Have both of you been to Charter Street Cemetery?
Yes.
Beautiful old cemetery, right?
Yes.
So the Charter Street Cemetery is the oldest cemetery in Salem, but it's also the second oldest cemetery in the country. So you have all of these very intricately carved stones, the very thin tombstones, like I said, with the intricate carving and the writing. And it's this really just beautiful cemetery. It was built in 1637, and it holds 347 people. And there's a lot of people in the cemetery of a lot of historical significance. You have a Mayflower passenger, you have former politicians of the early Massachusetts Bay Colony. But the one that makes a lot of people kind of cringe is that one person that is buried there is the hanging judge, Judge Haythorne of the Salem witch trials. He is not the only judge buried there. We also have Judge Bartholomew Gedney, and we have the second wife of Giles Corey, who was the only person in the Salem witch trials who was pressed to death. We spoke about Giles last week. So you have this amazing, beautiful cemetery, very old, very historic. The air about it is just one that leads right into hauntings. And it is a place where people seem to feel a lot of heaviness. There's a lot of reports of people walking through the cemetery, and as they're walking, they have these very deep feelings of despair that kind of come out of nowhere. There are cold spots in the cemetery. There are people that swear that they see or hear dirt moving on the ground of people walking through the cemetery. And that I like that part in particular. I really like the sightings of the dirt moving in the cemetery as people are walking through it. And part of the reason for that is the cemetery was a location where one of Salem's famous sons, Nathaniel Hawthorne, walked with his would-be wife. She lived in the house right next to the cemetery, and one of the things they would do is that they would walk through the cemetery at night. So you have these people reporting seeing dirt move and feeling those cold spots, and it makes you think of Nathaniel Hawthorne and his wife, Sophia Peabody, walking through the cemetery at night.
Well, I have to interrupt 1 second.
Absolutely.
I have to tell you, I've been there in January, I've been there in April, and I've been there in October. And it doesn't matter what times of the year, there is a sense of like a coldness at times when it's warm. You know what I mean? And there is not all the time is that heaviness feeling, but certain times of the night, or is it certain times of there is this like heaviness that
there's a definite kind of shift when you walk through that little gate. And it's interesting because they recently did an extensive renovation of the cemetery. They added walking paths, and they really did a beautiful job renovating at the cemetery. but that feeling is still there. If you were to walk in with your eyes closed and you had been there previously, it feels the same. There's this very strong feeling of just presence. And it's not one I personally have felt is negative, but there's a definite kind of shift right when you walk through those gates to that cemetery. And what's that?
It's a beautiful.
It is. It's a gorgeous old cemetery. And it's one that you can't always go into it, but it is right next to the memorial for the Salem witch victims, which you can go into 24/7. And a lot of times people will go into the memorial and they'll take photos into the cemetery. And there are people that have reported, the classic orbs floating over specific stones, like this wispy kind of mist weaving in and out of the stones. People have captured EVPs in Old Burial Point before. So you have a lot of these really classic examples of hauntings that you would tie to a cemetery. This just happens to be a very, very special cemetery that people have a lot of experiences in.
There's a lot of love for that cemetery, too.
Yeah, there really is.
Which is an amazing thing. You had something to say, Jen?
Yeah, a few things. Well, Nathaniel Hawthorne, I think it's really interesting. Like, he was a descendant of Hathorne.
Yeah.
So he changed his name because of that. And I think
he was not a fan of that man.
Yeah. And I also think I wonder sometimes how much of that activity is stuff that people bring in with them. There's that presupposition that people are going into that space and they know, and chances are they know who's buried there, and chances are they know what that history is. Are they bringing that with them, or is it a manifestation of something that's already there that's kind of being triggered by their presence?
Well, I have to answer. Can I just see? Maybe I'm wrong. Sarah, you can vouch. But don't you feel that a lot of the people that have these strong attachments to this location, based off of, of coming there with this type of, mediums and psychics and things, and they're channeling some of that through. Do you feel that some of that still stays after they're out of that environment? Like their abilities still bring these people wander around? Or no?
I feel that a lot of people who visit that cemetery walk in very charged in one way or another. One thing, though, is I think a lot of people go into that cemetery very amped up in a way because they think they're going into the cemetery where the victims of the Salem witch trials are buried. And that is not true. We do not know where the bodies of the Salem witch trial victims are, but you have people walking into this place. Number one, it's a cemetery. Everybody walking into a cemetery feels a certain way about it. But when you walk in with these very amplified ideas as to what the cemetery is, the city that you're in, the history, and who is here and who you think is there, it definitely makes a different kind of experience.
Well, I think it also opens doorways too. You're there with that intention. Your energy may not be residing there, but you're going there with these triggers or these expectations, and that kind of just it opens a door or a window.
Well, yeah. I do believe that, people have to understand something. A lot of people walk into these type of things. Like if you said something was haunted and it's known to be haunted, they're walking in with the expectation that something's going to happen. Everything happens. It's going to happen. I'm going to see things. So there's this heightened experience as well. But sometimes the people have to understand, they're not always on. They're not always there for your entertainment. It just happens that you catch it. But not every time you're going to see something. Unfortunately, it is what it is.
I think we kind of touched on that when we had Kathy on the show too.
Yeah,
the times where it doesn't happen validates the times that it does happen.
Correct.
Yeah, and those are equally important.
Correct.
Absolutely. it gives you the comparison.
It's a beautiful place, and make sure you put that on your to-do list when you go. It's
absolutely
beautiful.
Yeah, and we talked about that feeling of walking in that cemetery. Hawthorne himself had this to say about the cemetery. There is a fatality, a feeling so irresistible and inevitable that it has the force of doom, which almost invariably compels human beings to linger around and haunt, ghost-like, the spot where some great and marked event has given the color to their lifetime, and still more irresistibly the darker the tinge that saddens it. And that was his opinion of the Charter Street Cemetery.
Sounds like my biography.
I mean, you know, Nathaniel was such an influential individual in the town of Salem as well.
Yeah.
I mean, and said he engrossed himself in that town so much, not just between, the places where he lived and the places that he had, but the books and his literature and being an author, and then trying to shun away the attachment of the judge thing. It just he's
my seventh cousin. So we went to yours too, Sarah.
Yep. Our people. But I had mentioned the house that Sophia Peabody lived in that is right next to the cemetery, and how people say that they see people walking through. That house, the Grimshaw House, is another building where people say that they see things going past the windows.
Up on the top, right?
The top windows, yep. Yep, where they see people in the windows, and they have these little, right out of the corner of your eye. And it's interesting that you have this house that is right next to the cemetery, and it's connected, but they have these very individual stories to it. And there is another building right up against the cemetery that has its own stories as well, and that is the Pickman House. So if you see the Pickman House next to the cemetery, it is very, very tiny. It is a tiny, tiny little house. It has a tiny, tiny little door, and it's a building that you really wouldn't even really notice. A lot of times people just walk right past it and they don't give it any attention because it is so just size-wise and like impact-wise next to, you have the Peabody Essex Museum on one side and then the cemetery and the memorial, and here's this little house in between. But the house was built in 1665 by Samuel Pickman. He was a sailor, and the memorial was built behind the Pickman House in 1992. And there is a story about the Pickman House. And it is very heavily debated. There are people in Salem that swear that this is nothing but a story. There are other people in Salem that swear that there's evidence of this somewhere, and they heard this, and it was passed down through generations, and it must be real. And the story of the Pickman House is that there was a family of 3 at one point that had moved into the home, a man, his wife, and his 7-year-old daughter. And it was in this house that the man, his mental state started to deteriorate. He claimed that he could see demons in the house. He started to fight off evil entities in the house. And it became this kind of obsession. And he started having these violent outbursts. And it just got worse and worse and worse as time progressed. At one point, it is said that he took his daughter, tied her up, and kept her in the attic of the home. And he left her there. Another part of the story claims that he very, very violently murdered his wife. I won't get into the real in-depth details of it because it is a very, very horrifying way to die if this is true. After he killed his wife, he went into the home and allegedly hung himself. So you have this story that people are arguing about, that whether it's true, whether it's not. And I will tell you that, before I tell you my little tale about the house. There are employees. The building is now converted into the Welcome Center for the Charter Street Cemetery. So for just a couple of years ago, for the first time, you could go in. It was open to the public. And it's amazing to walk into this building. But there are employees that claim to hear voices at night. There are employees that claim to hear very, very low screaming, kind of sneaking in under the everyday noise of Salem, Massachusetts. There are people that claim to have taken photos of the upstairs floor where the daughter was apparently kept prisoner, and they see things in the windows. Now, my little story of the Pickman house, the first time Jay and I had ever gone to Salem, this was back in 2015, and we went to the cemetery. We went up and down that main road there that the Pickman house sits on, and both of us walking past this house, and we walked past it a number of times because of the location of it, and there was a point where both of us looked at each other and we're like, is there something about this building that's not okay? And we were like, yeah, there is. Both of us, without any knowledge of this story, on our first visit to Salem, both of us felt something very, very heavy about this house. And it's not something we can explain, but it definitely, there was a definite feeling of kind of just sunken in, dark kind of heaviness when we walked past this house. So when I read this story, years and years later, it was very like, oh, okay, so there maybe there is something to that house. But historically, historians of the city say that it is just a story, but you never know.
Well, I have to say, hi, John Bigger. And the next one is, it says the Pickman house is a crazy haunted. Hi, John.
Yeah.
So that's what Jay had said. So
oh, Jay said that.
I mean, only when I was there, and I've gone, I've been over there. I've been to Salem over 30 years. Yeah. I've gone so many times. I can close my hi, Nicole. That's Nicole, our new friend from the paranormal.
Hey, Nicole.
Yes. But yeah, there is that feel, over in that area that is, it seems darker than other, even in spite of the fact of whatever else that went on in the other singings and that seems very, I don't know. It's this.
There's a weird feeling to it. There definitely is.
There really is a weird vibe there,
and
I get that. I get that feel, and I've seen some there. At one point there was this light in the corner window, like you just saw something go, and then like this, and you're like, wait, did I just see that?
There's nobody in there.
Something to make that, because if you ever been to Salem, if not, whatever, go. But when it rains, right? It rains there. Every store, everything shuts down. It's closed before you blink of an eye. Everything's gone. The people are all out, and then you're walking the street going, where did everybody go? Like you shut a light off and everybody just disappeared.
Yeah.
But you walk through, and there is a sense of heaviness, but there is a tranquility.
Oh yeah.
Walking through the streets at night by yourself. It's this ominous.
It's one of my favorite things to do.
It's beautiful. I can't even tell you how beautiful it is, but it's still this, like your hair on the back of your neck, just, and you're like it's just overwhelming. So I suggest that if you go and you walk the red line, it's fine. It's a safe town. Everybody's great there. But I suggest to do it, and then you'll understand what we mean. It's just beautiful to do that. We always used to do that. It was beautiful. Now we don't have time, but whatever.
Yeah, the air is different in that place.
Yes, it is.
100%.
So we're going to another location.
Sure. There's a lot. I only have a small sampling, but yeah, there's a lot.
I want to get everything that
So,
you put in there.
sure. So we talked about the Charter Street Cemetery next to the Pickman House and next to the Grimshaw House. There's three. There's more, but I'm going to say there's three cemeteries in Salem that people tend to go to the most that have these connections to the witch trials. The second one that people have experienced and reporting a lot of experiences is the Howard Street Cemetery in Salem, Massachusetts. It is Salem's fourth oldest burying ground. It's home to 1,100 souls. It's 2.5 acres, and it was once reserved for strangers to the city. But that didn't stick. There's anybody and everybody has been buried in the Howard Street Cemetery. But the notoriety of the Howard Street Cemetery comes from what it was before it was the Howard Street Cemetery. We do not know exactly where it happened, but the vicinity of the Howard Street Cemetery is believed to be the field where Giles Corey was pressed to death. So it took hundreds of years for people to be able to pin where these things happened. It was only a handful of years ago that people were able to finally definitively track down where the hangings took place. So as of right now, we just know that the Howard Street Cemetery is approximately where it is believed that Giles Corey was pressed to death. And that is who people tend to believe they see walking around the field. There have been many, many reports of people seeing a figure slowly looming through the cemetery, walking around in the grounds around the cemetery. And one of the earliest reports of this actually happened in 1914. Present day, if you're looking at the cemetery from one particular direction, there is a convent that is nearby. And one of the most famous sightings of this figure walking through the Howard Street Cemetery came from a bunch of nuns that were living in the convent. And this is significant because these nuns reported seeing someone walking through the cemetery. And then very, very shortly after, on June 25th, 1914, was the Great Fire of Salem, Massachusetts. So here's where we get this idea that the spirit of Giles Corey is seen in Massachusetts, in Salem, before a great tragedy strikes. So you'll often hear people talk about the curse of Giles Corey. So if you ever hear anybody saying that they saw Giles Corey or a spirit walking through the grounds of the Howard Street Cemetery, be aware. Because the last time it was widely reported, there was a gigantic fire that demolished a huge portion of Salem, Massachusetts.
He's like the Mothman.
Yeah.
There was
Giles Mothman Corey.
Yeah.
There was a fire when we were there. There was a fire recently.
That's right. There was the wildfire when you were there. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it got worse after we had left. It got worse. They said that people were told in the Hawthorne to shut their windows because it was, weird.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
That place
So we have.
so mysteriously beautiful. Go on. I'm intrigued. Go on.
Well, I mentioned the curse of Giles Corey, and there's actually multiple sides to the curse of Giles Corey. Corey, as he was being pressed to death in this field, there's a lot of varying reports as to what his final words were. But a lot of people report that one of the last things that he said while he was still on Earth was that he placed a curse on Salem, and specifically the sheriff, George Corwin. Damn you, I curse you and Salem. So 4 years after Giles Corey had died, Sheriff Corwin very suddenly died of a heart attack at 30 years old. And there are records that state that for decades and decades and decades and centuries, people who had that role in Salem, Massachusetts of sheriff, at some point started experiencing sudden medical ailments, sudden blood diseases, sudden heart attacks. And this is not official, but it is a fact that at one point the sheriff's office moved 9 miles away. So we have the Salem sheriff in a different town. And since then, this record of ailments hitting the sheriffs of Salem, Massachusetts stopped. Curse of Giles Corey.
Well, they deserved it. I'm kidding. Hello.
Maybe George Corwin.
Yes. It's still like we talked about this before. The remnants of how we as individuals have not progressed further. From this. Instead of over sort of welcoming and open arms this different and strangeness of things, that it becomes somewhat of a reality. You shun it off with the cross, and it just doesn't make anything sensible
but
to me
that's
at all.
that's the other crazy part about the Salem witch trials, is that the majority of these people weren't really all that different. They weren't. I mean, they weren't really like the goth kids that you see.
Yeah.
I mean, and I you have this figure of Giles Corey, and it's always strange and kind of funny to me, because you have Giles Corey, and for whatever reason, Giles Corey has become this figure that people romanticize so much.
Yeah.
That Giles Corey, he stood up for. Giles Corey was a terrible person.
Well, did you notice that those are the reasons why they chose these people? It was like Mean Girls in the 1692.
Yeah, but some of it was just stuff that like they had no control over, like smallpox breaking out in someone's house. Like it's
whatever.
It's whoever doesn't like you, and
it's what Ann Putnam and her buddies,
exactly,
whoever they decided to point a finger at.
And that could have been anybody.
It would have been great that we could do a seance over there.
I wouldn't want to do that.
At Howard Street Cemetery?
Or somewhere, anywhere in there. You wouldn't want to do that?
No, honestly, my take on, I think I've told you this, my take on the victims of the witch trials is that they weren't witches, and like people still call them witches to this day. And I think that might be part of the reason why they are not at rest, is because they're still trying to like reconcile this identity that was not theirs. And I don't know. There's some of them I wouldn't want to do a seance there. I just wouldn't. And I'm up for a seance all the time.
Oh, Sarah, look at us.
I wouldn't want to I wouldn't want to target those particular people. Everyone thinks it's like so cool to talk to the witches, or you know what I mean? Like I just wouldn't want to target those.
I agree. I would do a seance there. I wouldn't particularly call them out and ask them to show up. If they did, great.
I agree.
I just feel like they've suffered enough.
Right. I agree. And that's why I think there's a lot of people that, do what Genevieve says, but there's also a lot of people that pay homage to them as well.
But even paying homage to them is a difficult thing too, because you're still encapsulating them with that identity.
Right.
They need to be free of, you know what I mean?
I
don't know. I struggle with it. I'm sorry. I will mute myself now.
No, that's good. That's fine. All right.
Don't mute yourself. So we talked about Corwin.
Yeah.
So the next spot that I'd love to talk about is very, very deeply tied to George Corwin, and that is the Joshua Ward House, which today is the Merchant, a very slick, swanky, beautiful boutique hotel right there in the center of downtown Salem. The Joshua Ward House, sorry, not Merchant House, that's New York. The Joshua Ward House was built in 1784. The structure itself was 1784, but there was a structure there much earlier, and the land has a much deeper history, and that is what is tied to Sheriff Corwin. The property of the Joshua Ward House is where the home of George Corwin was at the time of the Salem witch trials. And if you go into the basement of the hotel, the foundation is still the original foundation of Corwin's house and all of his land in that area. So Corwin was one of the great monsters of the Salem witch trials. He was related to one of the judges, Jonathan Corwin, and he relished this role of going after the witches and getting them. And he earned some nicknames some of which, people do argue about the historical accuracy of this, but there are stories that he became known as the Strangler, partially due to the incredibly violent ways that he would interrogate people in his home at the location where the current Joshua Ward house is. There have been a whole lot of accounts of people that have stayed there experiencing a choking sensation while on the property, getting hair pulled, clothing pulled, physical touch out of nowhere when there's no one there. I did read one account that I thought was interesting of people finding candles sitting in pools of wax when the candles had never been lit. I wish I could have found a photo of that. I wasn't able to. There are reports of books coming off the shelf, but the biggest, not the biggest, but the most famous account of hauntings at this house. If you look up the Joshua Ward house, there is a photograph. And this photograph was taken in the 1980s. After time had gone by, this building took on a lot of different identities. And at one point, there was an office there for Carlston Realty, and they were holding a holiday party. And someone took a photo, and when they developed it, what came out was very different from what they were expecting to see develop on this film. They were taking it of this woman who worked for this company. And what happened when this photo developed, it is a figure of a woman with very distorted figures, very, very dark, and this mass of what people assume is hair. It all wired angles around this distorted face. It's a horrifying picture. And we have both sides. We have people saying that this is obviously a spirit that was caught on camera. We have other people saying that this was just a weird, fluky way that the film developed and that she was standing in front of a holiday wreath. And that's what the shape is. But
it's always those holiday wreaths.
Those wreaths. But you gotta Google the Joshua Ward House witch, because that is what this figure has been called now over decades. But it is a horrifying image. It is a very, very creepy photo that has a whole lot of debate tied to it. Now, this building, Joshua Ward House, my family used to have a place in Salem, Massachusetts, and it was directly in back of the Joshua Ward House. So it was on this land, George Corwin's old land. And I never had anything really, really crazy happen while we were there. One thing that did happen, though, was so my family owned this place. Nobody lived there full time. It was rented out a lot. There we go. There is the picture of the Ward House witch. And so every time a tenant would leave, we would take care of the place. And one of the times I was up there, I was just out walking around in Salem, and all of a sudden I had this very overwhelming feeling of, you got to get back to the place. You got to get back there. Go back there now. And I was very close by. So I went there, unlocked the door, and when I opened the door, the timers on the stove were all going off at full volume. So I turned everything off, and I went to our next door neighbor, and I was like, listen, I'm really sorry. Like, have you been hearing these alarms going off next door? And he was like, nothing's been going off. We haven't heard anything. So that's my own little personal experience with a place that is on the grounds of the former grounds of George Corwin. One other thing, the last night that I was there before it was sold, it was very late at night. Furniture was out except for a couch, and I was laying on the couch, and I had my phone, I was holding it, and I was just scrolling through, and my phone, without me hitting any buttons, flashed and took a couple pictures. And I was just, all right, whatever, and I didn't think anything of it. The next day I looked at the photos. I don't know what it is. It could just be a weird light anomaly, but there is this strange shape in the corner of the room, illuminated in this red light. And it looks like an old woman. which is interesting to me because the woman that we bought this place from, she was the only person who had ever lived there. And every time we ever went there, we would always say hello to her, goodbye to her. We always talked to her when we were there. And at the time that I was laying on this couch scrolling through, I had just said goodbye to her and apologized that we had to leave and thanked her for letting us be there.
So first you waited a full day. You waited like the next day to look at these pictures.
Well, like I didn't. It was like it was very light. It was really late, and my phone just started flashing, and I was just like, ugh. And I didn't think anything of it really.
Do you think? I mean, given the, like, some people might say like the Salem witch trials may have caused some of these hauntings.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that perhaps it was actually that energy is, there's like certain spaces that tend to draw in paranormal energy, and there's certain spaces that have ley lines and different things. Do you think that could have been where Salem was founded, and that the witch trials themselves were even a manifestation of that energy? I think a lot about this stuff.
I think that is entirely possible. Anybody who has been to Salem, or you know what, I'm not even going to say just Salem. I'm going to say that area of Massachusetts, that county, that region of New England. There is a very different feel there.
There's a lot of towns like that.
So yeah,
New Hope has a vibe like that. New Orleans has a vibe like that. There's certain spaces. Keyport has a vibe like that.
Yeah,
that energy is just different.
And I think Salem, kind of how we had talked about last week, how all of the causes of the witch trials were kind of like a perfect storm that really came to this head that would not have been anywhere near what it turned into if even one piece was missing from that puzzle. I kind of feel that way about Salem, that the Salem witch trials are a piece of the energy of that place, because yeah, Salem is known for the witch trials. There is so much more that has happened in that city that people don't think of, both positive and negative. It is it is just, I mean, this is something we could do forever, is talk about all of the history of Salem, Massachusetts. But there is a tremendous amount of history there that is besides the witch trials that I think kind of add all together to form this kind of energetic puzzle that is Salem, Massachusetts.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean,
100%.
There's we haven't even, I don't know where we're going. Where are we going next kind of thing? I don't want to end up saying it if we're going there. The next haunted spot. I
was going to go to the witch house, but we can go anywhere.
That was one of them. I mean, you got the witch house out, you got the Hawthorne, you got the Lycene, which is now called Turnip.
Yep.
I mean, that's just another little bit. I mean, we go into the witch's house because I think that's an amazing.
We are. So we talked about George Corwin, and I had mentioned that he was related to the Judge Jonathan Corwin. The Jonathan Corwin house is the witch house. It is the only building in Salem that is still standing that has a direct connection to the witchcraft trials. It was built in 1675. As I mentioned, Corwin was one of the judges. He is buried in Broad Street Cemetery. And an interesting little fact about the house is that in the 1940s, there was a street that the city wanted to expand. They actually moved the house 35 feet back from its original location. This house is now known as the Witch House, which I get a giggle out of, that the former judge, the former judge's residence is now known as the Witch House. But there's a lot of stories about the Witch House. I do want to emphasize that it was Corwin's house. This house was not tied to any of the people actually accused of witchcraft. There were no accused witches that lived there. But there's a lot of reports in and around the witch house. We have people hearing whispers of conversations when there, because I do want to mention the witch house is a museum now. You can go in, you can visit inside of it.
Right. But the witch's house isn't really, like, what is the meaning behind it, why they called it? Did you say that, or I missed that? I don't, sorry.
Because, no, that's okay.
Because how I always thought, I was like, we're going to a real witch's house. Like, I was like, I think that's the way people acted, like when
they do
called it. but it was actually where people went, and the
It's the
judge.
judge's house.
Yes.
But did he question them there?
No, he
There,
them.
there are some accounts that believe that there may have been a little bit of interrogation happening there, but the majority of the interrogations happened in the next town over in Danvers, at Ingersoll's Ordinary and taverns and meeting houses. But it's not out of the realm of possibilities that there may have been one or two instances, a handful of instances at this house.
But they would come to his house. They would come and they would tell him that we think this person's a witch, and they would say you're going to jail until your trial or whatever, right? That's what happens. People thinking that they're going in and it's going to be this house, because I'm not gonna deny I went in there thinking the same thing. But it wasn't.
I mean, it's a beautiful house.
It is. I do. I'm going to tell you, lots of creaking. There wasn't a lot of people in when I was there.
Mm-hmm.
You definitely hear whispering.
Yep.
And it's like, it's whispering, but no matter if you stand there or not, you can't figure out at all what any of the words are saying. You just hear.
Yep. Exactly. That's exactly the things that I was reading about this house is whispers that can't be discerned. One that I read a lot of accounts is the voice of a young girl that people say it sounds like they're in the next room over. And then you go to the next room and there's nobody there. And then you hear it in the next room over. You go to the next room and there's nobody there. Cold spots. Now, I'm going to say for the witch house, I don't know how much credit you can give to the cold spots simply because of the age of the building. That's something that I never experienced there. John, I don't know if you did any of the times you were there. Yeah.
No.
So you do have to take that into consideration. But the whispering and the hearing of the young girl's voice, there are accounts of people who say that their arms are grabbed or that they feel the very specific feeling of a hand touching them on a shoulder. Chills, again, the whispers. And there are paranormal investigators who have been allowed in the house. And they have reported that during investigations, again, one of these classic things you hear, that the batteries will just drain out of their equipment like that, or their equipment will just stop working. And they bring it out of the house and everything is great. So,
yep. What happens at our store. So we get that a lot. But there is a lot of creaking. Like, no one's moving. You're listening to a woman speak to you about the history and everything in it. And you hear creaks. And she, like, even the woman's like, you guys are the only people in here. Like,
yep.
The house isn't settling because it's been there for a very long time.
It's been settling for a very long time.
We get that in the store too. That's an old building, and we get that a lot. We hear like people walking in, or people even walking through the hallway, and I would say,
doors opening, and they're not even.
My house is built in 1841, and we hear that here a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's it can be jarring.
Yeah.
Especially with people's abilities of wanting to hear and see and like something. It's already at the level, so they're already experiencing this type of, like, everything in their head is manipulated. Yeah. So, but it's a great house.
Yeah. And it's really it is a museum, like I had previously mentioned, and the subject of the museum is pretty much like the lifestyle of these people that were there during the Salem witch trials and around that era. There are some artifacts you can see. I believe they have a fork that was owned by John Proctor hanging on the wall, but it's a really, really interesting museum to see these like daily life aspects of these people that were alive in 1692 and beyond.
Right.
Yeah.
It's a great experience. Yeah, it is. But it's actually, here's another thing. It's actually next to the Ropes Mansion, which is where Allison, that is considered Allison's house from Hocus Pocus.
Yes, indeed. Also very haunted.
And their grounds. I mean, because I know that they're known for their beautiful
The
greenery and
gardens.
flower. The gardens are just stunning.
The gardens
So
at the Ropes Mansion are beautiful. But
yes,
the Ropes Mansion itself does have a lot of stories to it and a lot of tragedy tied to it. But before I go to the Ropes Mansion, I wanted to mention, you had mentioned, the former Lyceum Hall, which is now Turner Seafood. Turner
right.
Seafood is one of the most popular restaurants in Salem, Massachusetts. I have never heard anybody say anything other than amazing, glowing reviews about the food at Turner Seafood. Before it was Turner Seafood, though, it has a very, very long history to it. At one point in time, I mentioned it was called the Lyceum Hall. This hall in Salem was a cultural and intellectual hub. It was a place where authors and artists and scientists and these very intellectual minds of the day would go, and they would speak, and people would come to see them, and they would share their ideas and what was going on in the world. It was a really landmark structure, and it's actually the place where Alexander Graham Bell first conducted the first public demonstration of the telephone in 1877. So it really was this very important landmark in Salem. Previous to it being the Lyceum and all of these other versions of itself, the earliest version of itself, the structure was not there, but it is located on the grounds of Bridget Bishop's orchard. Bridget Bishop was the first to be executed in the Salem witch trials. So you have this restaurant now, this place that's very high energy, people going in and out of, people celebrating, very very active, a lot going on in this place. And there are visitors and staff that have reported seeing a woman floating through various parts of the restaurant. There are people that claim to have caught glimpses of people behind their shoulders in windows and mirrors that are in the location, pictures falling over. And so there are reports of people smelling the scent of apples around the restaurant and outside. However, I do just want to point this out, that there are people that I have talked to in Salem that told me that they know that at one point in time there were tour guides years and years and years ago that would spray apple scented stuff before bringing their tours there.
See, as a tour guide, as a tour guide.
Yep, but that does not account for the figures being seen and the touch and the cold spots.
But she owned that. She owned an apple orchard that she obtained through her marriage.
Yes.
And it was very like it was an orchard. It was not.
It was huge.
It was a huge piece of plot of land that a female owned during the 1600s. And
that she got through a sort of legal loophole that definitely put eyes on her from her
that's why
her
she
neighbors.
Was the first person pointed at, because that was prime location during a time frame. I have been there frequently.
Do you love it?
I think the food is great. I think the ambiance is great. The people are awesome.
Mm-hmm.
They're always like this because it's constant. No matter when you go, it's busy as hell. You're either waiting outside or waiting inside or whatever. So we always make reservations. I highly suggest that if you do it. But I have not experienced really anything in there but the hustle and the bustle.
Yeah. There was an episode of one of the bigger ghost shows. And I can't remember which one it was. Where I don't think it was Ghost Adventures. This was fairly recent.
Fairly recent?
Mm-hmm. And the team that was there investigating, at one point, the register and the register tape had come out and had things typed on it when there was no one there to do so.
Well, I know that it wasn't that long ago that they did a cross live event
They did.
with
Yep.
like Katrina, Adam Berry, Amy
Mhm.
Bruni, Chip Coffey.
And
They
they were at multiple locations.
yeah,
Yep.
at the same time. So I don't know
Mhm.
if that was it, but I know that there was a lot of obtained at that location, and also the witch's house with the ghost adventures. They asked a question. I know that they asked Bishop a question: "Were you a witch?" And she said no,
Yeah.
Let
which
her
was kind of
rest.
And I'm sure she was very adamant about that, especially because Salem witch trials, she was the first accused, she was the first executed, but it was not the first time that she had been accused of
it
witchcraft
was
in her life.
that was the 2 times prior to this one.
Don't
Yeah,
wake her
which
up anymore. Let her sleep.
Yeah.
yeah, but I still think a
Or
lot of
Bridget.
these people still there residually at some points of it, because of all the trauma that they've taken, into their lives during a time frame that they couldn't really live because there were too many finger pointings of everything, and the struggles and the weather and the
Well, it was also a tough time to be
environment.
alive, regardless of
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
witchcraft part out. You
Yeah.
couldn't
Yeah.
really be like an individual. You had to fall in
Yeah.
line with society, and it's only
Right.
been relatively
Right.
recently that people can be individuals. When you look at the
Right.
grand scheme of history,
Yeah.
They still
and
want to
even
do it
now, it's
again.
kind of questioned.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So yeah, I mean, food is great, ambiance is great, it's great. I mean, there's also stories of the Rockefeller.
I was gonna say, yep, the Rockefeller with the blue lady.
Yeah.
There are people that report seeing a woman in blue. In and around the restaurant, there are people. Genevieve, this will sound familiar. People in the restrooms hearing people that are not there. Genevieve had a very similar experience recently in Red Bank at Dublin House where that happened. One of my favorite stories about Rockefellers, though, was that they have a mural that's painted in there. And the person who painted it, when they were commissioned to paint this mural, the story that I heard was that they were supposed to be, they had it all planned out, all the colors and everything, and they painted it, and they ended up painting the woman's dress blue. And when they had asked, why did you change that? The painter was just like, I don't know. I felt I had to be blue.
Mm-hmm.
Without knowing the story of the woman in blue with Rockefellers.
Yeah. I feel like when I was there, I haven't been there in a long time. Because when we first went, the food was great, and then we went another, and then it wasn't as good as it used to be. I feel like I'm being watched.
In Rockefellers?
Like that there's this just watching. You just feel like you're being
just
watched.
peering, watching you.
Yeah. I mean, you got that, but then, I heard some things. What about Ledgers? That used to be the old a bank that's a little bit further too.
Yes, I did read, not anywhere near as extensively as Rockefellers and some of these other places, but there were people that I saw have written some things online about. But I mean, it's Salem. Every place is going to have something. The whole city is going to have something.
So let's do the Hawthorne.
Did you want to do the Hawthorne or the Ropes Mansion?
All right, do Ropes. Then we got, I know, but Genevieve gets mad at us that we go over.
So, okay, real quick. The Ropes Mansion, as you had said, Allison's house in Hocus Pocus. Beautiful, beautiful home. Amazing gardens. If you go, and the gardens are open 24 hours a day, so you can go in there at any point. It was built in 1727 for a local merchant. It eventually made it down to the Ropes family. March of 1774, during the American Revolution, the house was attacked because Ropes was loyal to the British Crown. At the time, he was sick with smallpox while his house was being attacked. He then died, and it's believed that it was the stress of this attack that caused his ultimate death in the home. More members of the Ropes family. There were two girls, Sally and Abigail. In 1839, Abigail was standing too close to the fire, and her dress caught fire, and she later died of her burns. There were other deaths in the house. Elizabeth Ropes died in one of the upstairs bedrooms, and another, one of the much later members of the Ropes family, Eliza, died in the building in 1907. So I talked about the fire that Abigail met her end during. There are a lot of stories about the Ropes mansion where people will be walking by, and in the upstairs windows, they'll see what they think is a fire. And from what I understand from somebody I know in Salem, it's to the point that the Salem Fire Department, when they get a call about a possible fire at the Ropes mansion, they have to send somebody to look at it, but they already know there's not going to be anything there. This is something that happens repeatedly with people seeing lights going on in the top floor that they think is a fire. I will also mention, I know somebody, another tour guide in Salem, who one night in the Ropes mansion, the gardens at night, she saw what she thought was a caretaker taking care of some of the gardens. And it wasn't until later that somebody told her that they don't have anybody there that does that at that time of night. The Ropes Mansion Gardens. The Ropes Mansion is beautiful. Beautiful spot.
It's gorgeous. It's elegant. It's like the creme de la creme set in that time period, to have that beauty of that house and the beauty of its gardens. It's just total Victoria. Like, it, to me, it's like a colonial grandeur of some sort. The way that it just is there, and it's just stunning.
It is. And just, I mean, even if you go there and the gardens aren't at like peak, just the layout of it and just this feeling of just absolute peace. It is one of my favorite places to go in Salem. And I have my little, there's a bench in the corner that I call my bench that I go to, and I will sit there in the middle of the night and just soak it all in. It's a beautiful spot. Mm-hmm. But a lot of sightings of the fire in the windows, and then more of the classics. You have the orbs when people are taking photos, cold spots, people getting touched, all of those types of things.
I have to tell you, Sarah, if we do that April thing on that Friday after dinner, grab your stuff. We're going on a walk with Sarah, and we're going all over, and we're doing our own little, tour. Oh yeah,
I'd be happy to.
And everything. EVP.
Be my dream.
Oh my God, we'll have so much fun. So now we arrive at the Hawthorne Hotel. So the Hawthorne, previously known as the Franklin Building, was designed and constructed by Samuel McIntyre, who is a huge, huge name in the history of Salem, Massachusetts. I'm not going to get into why he is so important, but he is a major figure in the architecture of Salem. It was constructed in 1809, and the whole kind of point was to have a place where it could be utilized by various groups coming into the city for various events. It opened in 1925, and it has a history. The Hawthorne Hotel also has portions that were on Bridget Bishop's orchard land. And when you look up the hauntings of the Hawthorne Hotel, there's two things in particular that keep repeating over and over and over again on the internet. One is room 325. That is rumored to be the most haunted room of the hotel. And then also room 612, where on the 6th floor, where people have reported seeing a woman walking through the hall and stopping at doors in the hallway. So, John, you have been to the Hawthorne Hotel multiple times. What have you experienced there? Next to it. Okay. Besides the fact that everybody knows that when I go, I feel the same way Sarah does. To me, it's heaven. I love it. I feel home. I feel the most comfortable, the most relaxed I feel ever anywhere in my life. I do. Besides the parlor.
Have you ever experienced anything there? There's other reports, especially on that third floor. People report hearing babies crying, lights turning on and off, and water faucets turning on and off.
So we've never had the privilege of staying on the third floor. We've been on the sixth floor, but I think we've stayed in the room before the room or the
612?
next to it. We never stayed in the actual room.
Mhm.
But we were in a room not this year, last year, I think it was. And I only went in it. I'm getting ready for the costume party, and I had to put on stuff before the makeup artist would come. And then all of a sudden I turn around and I look, and there's two chandeliers, and they're just doing this. And they're really going at it.
And those are not lightweight chandeliers.
And I'll tell you what I said. I said, I know
Mhm.
you don't like the idea of my costume, but it's not the same time period. I'm not disrespecting anything. So
And did it
let it
stop?
go. They stopped. And that was the
You
end
told it to let it go.
Yeah. I mean, because I'll be honest with you, I was doing drag and I was dressing up and putting the stuff I needed to put on, and it just looked angry. Whatever it was just mad. And I
And
think
did
we
it
were
stop?
on the sixth floor. It did. We
Okay.
were on the sixth floor. It could
Interesting.
have been that floor. You know, I don't understand how it's just specifically to this room or specifically to that hallway. It cannot be. I just don't think that people, it can't. It just, something's not going to go, oh, there's the parameter, there's the wall. I'm not going over past
Can't go
that.
through there. We don't haunt the fourth floor. It's either the third or the sixth.
But I'll tell you, that was the only experiences that we had. You know, the elevators do weird things, but if you ever been in it, stayed in it.
I was going to ask you about the elevators because a former friend of mine had a friend who they were at an event, and this was probably about a decade ago at this point, at the Hawthorne Hotel. And the friend of the friend told the story how, she was going to go back up to her room for, whatever, before come grab something, and that she walked into the elevator and that she just kind of nodded at the person in the elevator with him. You go in the elevator, hey, how are you? And that when she turned around to face the door, she went to go ask the person in the elevator something, and they weren't there. That she was the only person in the elevator.
No,
and she swears up and down, like, there was someone in that elevator when those doors opened and I went in. And there was no one there when I turned to just say, hey, how are you? Are you enjoying the event? Etc.
So here's the funny part. I had asked Elena, which is the food and beverage director for the Hawthorne, to be a part of Parlour Tea, to talk about the Hawthorne, the history, that kind of thing. So, and talk about some of the guests reporting some of the hauntings and the employees that she agreed to do it. So that is going to be really fun. So
awesome.
The only thing that I've ever experienced in it is like you could push a button and then a door opens and no one pushed it and no one's there. Like stuff weird. I didn't realize it. Now I got to pay attention if it was the third floor. But like the elevator stays on certain floors and stays there, and you're like, you're knocking on it. Hello, we're waiting for the elevator. And
elevators in and of themselves are surreal. They're creepy.
Weird.
Yeah. We had to walk up to the sixth floor. Oh my God. We were on the sixth floor. We had to walk up the stairs all in heels. It took forever. It was not good.
Uphill both ways.
It was impaled. I
ate lint for dinner.
Didn't win. It was terrible. Anyway, at the Hawthorne, I'll tell you, the staff is great. You got like Elena and Alice and Abby are like favorite bartenders. The staff is so over accommodating. It is probably one of the best places to stay with the largest amount of customer service levels at this. And
Nice.
I'm not, and I don't know if it's just because we've been there for so long and they know us, and they know that I am a constant preacher of how wonderful the place is. But if you don't go, the Nathaniel's and the pub during the holiday, they do the same food, but they're both places are wonderful. The people are wonderful. Go anyway. But they're also, Nathaniel is also part of the House of Seven Gables.
Yes, indeed.
Haunted.
Yes, indeed. So I didn't want to go too far over, but I did take some notes about the House of Seven Gables.
Go ahead, do it.
House of Seven Gables, built in 1668 by Captain John Turner. The house has been heavily renovated and changed and switched over in all of the years. It was turned over to another mariner, Samuel Ingersoll, which is where we get the actual name of the building, the Turner Ingersoll Mansion. Took it over in 1782. This was the inspiration of the House of Seven Gables from Nathaniel Hawthorne. And some of the experiences that people report in the House of Seven Gables. Tour guides there adamantly deny any activity at all. But there are people that claim seeing the movement out of the corner of their eye, that claim seeing silhouettes darting in and out and around the corner. Similar to the witch house, there are people that report hearing murmuring in various parts of the rooms. And there's some rooms that you walk in that people report that you walk in and it hits you like a brick wall. This general feeling of just malaise and just heaviness that is a very markedly different atmosphere than the other rooms in the home. There's also reports of people seeing a small boy up in the attic of the house and people seeing him darting in and around the windows when they're outside. So some people that feel that the boy might be one of the sons of Nathaniel Hawthorne. I don't know how much I feel about that. I know he had ties to the building. He never lived there, but you know, who knows? It was a place that he held dear.
That's like one of those romanticized ghost stories.
It must be him. And then you know, there's also the reports of a woman that you can see peeking through the windows and people seeing a silhouette of a woman going down the hallways. And people seem to feel that that could be Susanna Ingersoll.
You can hear, which people have said, the bustle noise. And you know what I mean? Like with the dresses had so much, and that you hear that. You're
the
like,
fabric.
Yeah. I mean, about the place is beautiful. It's well kept. It's beautifully preserved. There is a secret.
The secret staircase.
I'll tell you this. I screamed. I'm a claustrophobic. I already screamed up. I'm going up. I'm not. Don't. No, it was. I went in there and I was like, I can't be in here. I gotta get out.
Can't do it.
I can't. I gotta get out of here. And I couldn't breathe till I got out. Like it goes like this. In and I was like, oh, this is great. Goodbye. I'm out.
Yeah, it is
like, right down. I don't like it.
It is a challenge going up that secret stairwell.
But it's prime. That place was prime, like prime, like real estate because the way that the buildings are and the way that the grounds is like on the cusp, and you could just look out and you could see Boston across the bay.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful spot in Salem. Definitely one of the places. And it's right across from the oldest candy store in America. So.
Yeah. And as you guys know, we tried to speed this up as much as we can. But there are a lot of other locations and a lot of other places.
So many more.
There is a beautiful place to go. I think it's hauntingly beautiful. It has, it's the love of things, the beauty of it all, the witchy side, the darker side, the lighter side. It's definitely a place to go and visit and spend Not a lot of time because, there's a lot to do, but I don't think it's a week thing. That's just my opinion. To you? Depending on what
Oh,
you do.
I could live there
I would live there, but
in an instant.
yeah, touristing, everything. I think that you should read up on all of what they have to offer and
But
choose certain
also,
things.
John,
to go to.
you go through things really fast. So you want to go through really fast.
All I want to do is eat, drink, and shop.
Yeah.
I've been through everything else, so it's just like, and
So
then
other people might need a week or two.
maybe.
That's what I'm saying.
Well, I think a 2-week thing. I mean, I would live there if I had the opportunity, but it would have to be in a home that had something, and it has to be like a ropes mansion. It has to be big and grand.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Chestnut Street Mariner Mansion.
They just sold the Proctor House not that long ago. I kept saying, all I want to do is just win the lottery and buy the house. That's it.
That's it.
It was like what, 1 point something? That was not a lot.
Yeah.
Not a lot of money.
Yeah. Then we could have like tons of like amazing times there. Anyway, but yeah. Oh, that's it. Jay said it. It's the Old Pepper Company.
Ye Old Pepper Company. Oldest candy store in America, and it is delicious.
Yeah. So that ends our experiences in Salem for now.
For now.
We'll revisit it again. But I want to thank everybody for coming in and stopping by. Of course, we love having Sarah on talking about this. And, we'll keep you guys posted on the April possibility. I'm sure that will sell out very quickly because they normally don't do an April ball. And I think it's going to be amazing. And the theme is awesome. And we get a chance to be a part of it, all of us, to experience it together. So I'm very excited over that. And yes, I know Genevieve's looking at me. Well, don't know. You never know. But I want to be good about it. I want to think it might be. Hi, Melinda. Look, Melinda just got up. Anyway, but yeah, so keep an eye on that. Thank you, everyone. Go visit Salem if you haven't gone. You could go at any point in time. It's colder or hotter. Pick your choice. But it's
100%.
wonderful. So, but thank you. I hope.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Fingers crossed. And see you next time on Parlor Tea.
See you next Tuesday.
See you then.
There you go. We love that.